It's being recorded. Great.
Yeah. All right.
All right, we did it.
Oh,
Well, it's been good seeing you, Frank.
yeah, good seeing you, Andrew.
Yeah, amazing. Well, we're here to do it just to do this kind of informally, but we're here to talk about your new book. Um, honor your animal, right? Or honor the animal.
Honor thee, animal.
Honor the animal. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, very good. Almost got the title right. Let's start there. That's awesome. So I've been looking over the book, and I love it. It's your usual powerful message and clarion call of for good action in the world. I have some ideas about this, but why'd you decide to write this book right now?
Well, a couple of reasons. The first is just the enormity of the challenge we're facing right now. And I wanted to make a contribution in any way I can because our biosphere is endangered, our democracy is endangered, even our humanity itself is endangered. And I feel like everybody's got to participate in doing something. And so this is my contribution to that effort. And then, of course, with Trump 2.0, it was like, yeah, I really, really got to make a contribution now. But the other origin story here is I have a friend who's a personal trainer, and he was my climbing partner. And we'd go on these long adventures and with big long drives and big long hikes up to the mountain. And he was always talking about what he would do with his clients. So he was saying, we're going to go for a bike ride, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And throughout all of that, I began to realize that he was working on his experiential design
Mm,
for his people, for his clients, and he was a freelance, independent trainer, so he was able to make this stuff up from scratch. And,
yeah.
and he didn't call it experiential design, but I did, and so that's how this whole thing got rolling. I thought, okay, this guy's really onto something, and I want to make it real.
Yeah. So talk about that concept, and it's shot throughout the book of experiential design, and you're talking about experience in a very very broad way, but particularly in regards to an educational setting or a training or a team type setting. So talk about that concept just a little bit.
Right. Well, yeah, after studying the neuroscience for a long time, I
Yeah.
came to realize that experience really is the language of the body, and
Mm,
that the changes that take place in the nervous system are driven by experience. And especially the language that they always use is that changes to neurons and synapses and brain structures are all use dependent, which
mm,
is a fancy way of saying experience drives those changes. So if you have repetitive experience of any kind, that's what shapes the nervous system.
mm.
Experience is what drives the body. It's much more than words, language, any of that. It's experience. So if you're going to move the human body in some way, you have to design an experience. And that for me was the fundamental insight of all of this, because you can't move the body without without it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's great. Yeah. Um, so I one of the passages that really struck me was kind of early on in the book. You're talking about the sources of stress, and I'm just going to read these off. You become stressed when you feel as if you have minimal control, when you feel as if you have no predictive information, when you feel as if you have few outlets for frustration, right? And when you
Mhm.
feel like you lack social support. I mean, we looked at it in a broad sense. That almost seems like the diagnosis of American 2025. Um,
Right.
you kind of front load the book with the predicament writ large that we're
Mhm.
all kind of facing right now. And I love the way that you then move into some of the solutions to that. From a micro and then a macro sense. So maybe address a little about that. I mean, you agree that that seems like kind of what we're facing right now? It seems like the political situation and uh, the biosphere as well is sort of hardwired to give us the negative version, the one I just read off. Would you agree?
Right. And the way I pitch it is to say that the human nervous system is always asking a simple question of the world, of habitat, and that
Yeah.
is my habitat friendly?
Right.
Is the world friendly? And we're asking that question in effect, not consciously, but in effect, we're asking that question 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
All below the radar of consciousness. And
Right.
every time we do anything, we're always making that inquiry of the world.
Yeah.
And that's a fork in the road for our neurobiology.
Mm,
And so, if the answer is yes, the world is friendly, then we get this whole cascade of neurophysiological changes to the body. And, we pump out growth hormone, the amygdala settles down, the body just works better. But if we decide that the world is not a friendly place, then that's the other fork in the road. And now we start pumping the stress hormones, the amygdala becomes more sensitized, and everything suffers if that becomes chronic. So for trainers and coaches and teachers, this is fundamental. You've got to create an environment where the answer to that question is yes, I feel that the world is a friendly place.
right. 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 Yeah. And when I read that, and subsequent chapters there, I was like, yeah. I mean, when you think about the great teachers in your life, and actually I would include you in this, I would include you in that workshop that we took, and a number of interactions that we've had since and before. When you think about the great teachers, you think not just about what they say, but also the way the class and the environment makes you feel,
Mhm.
and it does feel very parasympathetic. It feels like, oh, I feel open, I feel relaxed, I feel able to be creative and access,
Mhm.
and that state seems to facilitate a kind of access to maybe a higher self, or a more creative self than you would if you have the Svengali evil teacher who's going to slap your wrist when you play the wrong note.
Right. It's always a question of expansion and contraction. So
Yeah.
when we're under stress, the entire organism, in effect, contracts.
Yeah.
And we become less creative and less capable, and everything becomes more urgent. And that's good in an emergency. But if your life feels like a chronic emergency,
Yeah.
that's not good for anybody.
Yeah. 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 I want to talk also about a little bit about this theme that you have, which really seems to go all the way from the smallest micro experience all the way up to some of the bigger issues, where biggest issues are focusing now, which is this concept of coherence versus splitting, right?
Right.
I mean, again, as a personal trainer, as someone that has kind of followed many of the trends in training, I think very in a very concrete way about the way that we split up the body when we train it. So the bodybuilder will go, I'm going to train my front deltoids today for an hour, and then tomorrow I'm going to train my right glute, and then the next day I'm going to train my quadricep, and so on. So the body is very much a kind of Frankenstein. The approach to fitness is very Frankenstein,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but of course you talk about it also in a much broader sense as well. So maybe shed some light on that idea, this kind of pathology towards splitting that we have as a society.
Right. Yeah. I ran across this word salutogenesis.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a great word for anybody who's working with the human animal. Salute, health, genesis, origins. And that simply implies going as far upstream as possible.
Mm,
And that's a great concept. That word, that language comes to us from this guy, Aaron Antonovsky. And he was a Israeli American sociologist who did work with the Holocaust survivors.
yeah.
And for him, he wanted to go to the root of the psychological underpinnings of their suffering. And he said it's all about coherence. It's all
Mm,
about people having the sense that their world is controllable and comprehensible and meaningful. And if people
mhm.
have that sense of coherence, then their bodies are going to work better, which
Mm,
is it makes perfect sense, but we need that reminder, right? And
yeah.
that's the problem with the modern world, especially modern media, that our experience now has become incoherent because we're flooded with this fire hose of conflicting information all the time now.
Yeah.
And when our worlds become incoherent, then that's stressful and our bodies don't work very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think about the like you said, the little fragments of experience that my kids and me on a bad day, get when I'm scrolling through Instagram or something, and it's 10 seconds of this completely irrelevant thing,
Mhm.
followed by another 10 seconds of something completely different. So the algorithm's sort of talking to my, amygdala on some level, and
Yeah,
feeding me
yeah.
something that it seems to think that I want. But these experiences have very little to do with one another sequentially.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and just how and you finish that and you have exactly the opposite experience that we were talking about before, like very incoherent. And I was thinking actually just etymologically about the notion of remembering, right? So remembering to put something back together,
Nice,
as a kind of
nice.
memory of our more coherent state, maybe of our ancestral state of being more coherent.
Right, right. And
Yeah,
it's a lot of people, especially in the native and indigenous world, are always talking about coherence and how
yeah,
do these things fit together.
yeah.
And that's not the world we're living in now. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's true. And the way you talk about like also specialization and how
mhm.
increasingly, I mean, healthcare, come on, it's just such a mess.
Right, it's all over medical care. Yeah, you got a doctor for your left knee and a doctor for your right knee.
Right,
It's like, wow.
right. And no one talks to anyone else. And if you
Right.
and if you bring up something that's outside of their specialization, they just glaze over, and have
Yeah.
nothing to say. I mean, presumably they all went to med school, so they should know something about it, but you know, that's outside their realm. Um, anyway, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of your proposed solutions, which are in a way kind of directly counteractive to those four stressors, right? This idea of
Mhm.
slowing down, this idea of really seeing people and also having these physical experiences, giving someone and experiencing yourself an embodied experience of education. So maybe talk a little bit about that, some of these
Right.
solutions.
Right. Yeah, it's got to be embodied, obviously. And this goes back to what some people have called the Cartesian hangover, because
Yeah.
we're still suffering from Rene Descartes and his mind-body split. And even though that's been thoroughly debunked by modern
Mm,
neuroscience, it still exists in the various pigeonholes that we place our disciplines in, and our scope of practice, the boundaries that, the specializations, as you mentioned. So we've got to put it all together into, yes, a holistic experience that involves people and the body. And there's good models for this. So I look at the athletic training model, especially
yes.
team sports. I look at the martial art model, which is in tradition is community based,
Yeah.
and the West African drum and dance model, which is the like gold standard for community involvement.
Yeah.
And there's great lessons to be had in all three of those models.
Yeah. 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 And I did want to drill down into those a little bit. You also talked about music training as well. Like
Mhm.
music training is one of the keys. And actually, that was one I was particularly interested in because I took up piano about 10 years ago.
Mhm.
So I had the ripe old age, my late 40s and mid 40s. And I took it up alongside my daughter, right? Now she is very number one. Her through her mom's side, she has a lot of musical talents and gifts, right? So her grandfather on that side was an opera director and very brilliant in music. I don't have so many, right? So we started training together. This is not relevant to my question, but I'm just curious about it. Is that she just took off like that, and I'm still kind of,
Mhm.
working away at it. Now I love it, and I find it very challenging and ultimately rewarding.
Mhm.
And my teacher also talks a lot about brain development and music and how it really lights up different parts of the brain. But what in particular to you about music training seems to kind of check some of these boxes for you?
Well, it's embodied, number one.
Yes. Yeah.
And number two, it's all about the reps, which that's ancient wisdom, right? But
Mm,
it's verified by neuroscience. We know that repetition is the key to all of this.
mm,
And in its simplest form, the formula for all this is repetition plus sleep equals learning. And
mm.
as simple as you can make it. So quality repetitions
Yeah.
plus quality sleep, then you get the learning that you're after. And of course, music is all about this. Um, I think nobody knows this better than musical teachers because
Mm,
they're always after us to be doing quality repetitions. And there's another theme that shows up across all of these models and musical training, and that's this oscillation between freedom and discipline. So
yes.
you do the disciplined work, you do the quality repetitions, but then there should also be a time for play
Mm,
and freedom. So you do your scales and your chords on the piano, for example, or your patterns on the drum, and you do them as best you possibly can.
yeah.
You do that for a while, and then your teacher says, "Okay, now let's see if you can play with that."
Yeah.
Different parts of the brain, different parts of the human experience, and you got to have both. The problem is that I think a lot of teachers specialize in either discipline or in freedom,
Mhm.
and then they argue about, well, which one is better. No, you got to have both. You got to have that rhythmic oscillation between those two modalities.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. I did a workshop last year with this is this guy named I don't know if I don't know if I call him a trainer. His name's Mark Wildman. I don't know if you've ever come across him, but he the workshop was about those heavy club swinging. Have you seen
Oh,
that?
right.
The heavy, yeah, so heavy clubs and and uh and then working with like a mace with all these kind of almost like a kata,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
then working with, and I'll show you, I've got one right here, working with these like martial arts type staffs, right?
Beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's multiple, and like the club swinging is like you got to get your weight exactly in the right spot. You got to be looking in the right place. You got to be, that it's where your feet are exactly right. A
Mhm.
very, very disciplined. And then the mace thing is somewhere in between. And then the staff work, because it's a lighter implement,
Right.
uh, no less dangerous, but it's a
Right.
lighter implement. Uh, is much more improvisational, and you can
Mhm.
play with it a lot more. And there was something really cool about kind of cycling through all three of those, and then letting the freedom inform the discipline, and vice versa.
Right, right.
And I've started to throw it in because no trainer does anything like that. No trainer does like, okay, let's do an unregular, let's do a play.
Mhm.
I mean, very few trainers do anything like that. And I've started to put it in, and I think it's really helpful. I love that mod. I mean, it's almost like the recess, and then
And
math.
work.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Very nice.
so I love that. Yeah, great. So yeah, so I mean, so some obvious practical questions. So you know, this is, and I remember you writing a little bit about this many years ago. A sort of body centric method of education. So it's like that you can, if the body's in the middle, that
Mhm.
uh, you can kind of spring out from that into many different disciplines, including the arts and law and medicine and history and all these other things. So what about a discipline that is heavily academic? What about that? How do you somatify that?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, in theory, it should follow exactly the same principles of repetition and sleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes if you're doing something that's heavily cognitive, you have to sit down for a period of time, either with
Mm-hmm.
paper or with a screen, whatever. But
Yeah.
there should be frequent interludes, you might say, of physicality. And these are the movement snacks that a lot of people now have undertaken.
Yeah.
I first came up with that phrase years ago. I said, okay,
Yeah.
we need these movement snacks, particularly for office work
Yeah.
and academic work. And whatever it is, every 20 minutes or something, you get up and you do some kind of movement. And I think that also solidifies that learning.
Yeah.
And it's particularly good for me as a writer because I'll sit down and I'll just suffer at the keyboard and it's like I can't grasp the language that I want and
Yeah.
I'm suffering and then after 20 minutes I say the hell with it, I'm going to take my medicine ball and I'm going to work my medicine ball, and sure enough, or I'll go for
Yeah.
a walk and sure enough, boom, the language comes. So
There it is.
it definitely works, and the problem of course is that we do much too much on the cognitive end. And that's in classrooms and, of course, in the workplace too. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So what So if my kids go into high school or college, would you say that like the best, I mean, you're talking about some pretty fundamental changes in the way that we educate
Right,
ourselves here.
right.
So if Frank, for instance, was going to open his own private school, high school, college, you know, give me some sense of what that might look like.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that. And it's, well, again, putting the body at the center.
Yeah,
If you leapfrog over the body, everything else is going to fail, basically.
yeah,
And our problem is now I love sports, I love athletics, but we've gone too far in that direction of movement specialties. We put that at the end of the school day, and it's a different thing. Sports are these movement specialties that we use for status building, and it's not really a somatic practice.
yeah,
and
yeah.
and and so at the very least I would start the school day with some movement,
Mm-hmm.
and especially in the martial art model. um hmm, okay. And that's easy to do because you can follow the martial art model even if you don't know any martial arts. People can lead a class. We're going to bow to each other. We're going to have a circle. We're going to do a little bit of calisthenics, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a few games. There's a few games in the book.
Yep.
And even if that's as little as 15 or 20 minutes, that sets the stage for the entire school day. And it's doable.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't have to completely rework your curriculum to do that.
Yeah. 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 That's great. Yeah. And my son is deeply into basketball. He's gonna go be a junior in high school right next year. And man, it is a different world than when I was in high school. I mean, the professionalization is so upsetting on so many
Right,
levels. I
right.
mean, it is basketball, so it's a winter sport, right? They're starting in August, and
Mhm.
they're doing the most intense hill runs and lifting in August.
Right, right.
Um, and then it goes all the way through. The season starts in something like November, officially ends in something like February or March. And then I was like, okay, thank God we're done. No, it restarted up in like 10 days. He barely had any time off. It's year round, so no cross train. I mean, forget about uh, the benefits of the cross train of different sports and different seasons, which you and I've talked about in many, many conversations in the past, but also just the wear and tear. And then the subliminal message you're talking about, like, okay, you're jamming yourself into this particular box, and you're getting a particular sense of what your body is for, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Like a warrior, it's like there's
Right,
not
right.
a lot of joy in it. It's just like you're doing one activity, and your job is, like you say, status building. So it's rough.
Right. Yeah. And the athletic model, again, I love sports and I played a lot of sports.
Yeah.
However, this emphasis on winning has gone way too far. And I always go back to John Wooden, the famous basketball coach, and he de-emphasized winning. And in the process, he ended up winning a lot of games because
Yeah.
he put so much emphasis on the quality of practice.
Quality. Yeah.
And for him, that was everything. You show up, you focus. If you're putting in your best effort, you have succeeded. And I read about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar talking about his experience at UCLA, and he was talking about how Wooden made practice so interesting and so
Mm,
meaningful
mm,
and so valuable that nobody on the team would even dream of missing practice. It was the
mm.
greatest thing ever. And that was the focus.
Yeah.
So, and then he won a lot of games.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something about that. I mean, my kids also went to a Waldorf school, and Waldorf has. I wouldn't say it's a perfect education at all, but it has some of these principles built in as far as the in breath, out breath, the deep respect of the body, a very holistic approach to education that includes a real foundation in the arts. And you, of course, talk a lot about creativity and art in the book. Um, but there was the even so, you philosophically you have this idea, but to be honest, not there was teachers are doing it to varying degrees, but really there was one or two teachers who were like John Wooden about it. who were the Jedi master, who could contextualize the learning in such a way that really made the students get involved. And I don't know how you do that. And I don't know how you train a teacher to be able to do that. I mean, do you have thoughts about that?
Well, the martial art model again was good.
Yeah.
Wooden was kind of a sensei in his own right. He did
Yeah.
things like when he had brand new freshmen come into the program, he would teach them unbelievably how to tie their shoes, make sure their socks were just so in the shoe to prevent blisters. And at the time, the kids were, well, I know how to tie my shoes. Don't tell me this, coach. But coach said, no, we have a ritual. We have a way to do this. We have a formality. We're going to follow this formality. And sure enough, that held sway all through UCLA into the pros. And you could be sure that these Magic Johnson, Bill, all of these people would have followed that same thing through the whole career.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think
it's the message that this is valuable.
Yeah,
that's the message, and it came through for him.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, I think it also ties into a number of your themes, which is like slowing down, being present, right, and embodying. I mean, it's like tying your shoes. Well, that's a physical action, right? So let's start with paying close attention to this thing that we're usually not thinking about at all. Let's give that importance. Okay, now we're going to give the importance to how we're about dribbling, now passing, now running this play, now doing something increasingly complex. So I mean, I think that fits right in with a lot of your themes. Great. Yeah, I mean, any thoughts? So for those of us who are, I mean, I'm in a form of education because I'm a trainer, but for people who are not themselves trainers or in education, how can you bring some of these concepts and ideas into your life?
Great idea.
Yeah.
The first one is going back to the beginning of our conversation, experience being the language of the body and creating, instead of trying to transform your life through language. I'm a language guy. I enjoy language and it's important, but really the most important thing is the experience. So creating the experiences that will transform your life. Experience is key. You have to be your own experiential designer, if you and sit down with a piece of paper. What kind of outcome do I want? What kind of functional outcome do I want in my life? What kind of activities do I want to engage in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years? And okay, what kind of experiences will set me up for that? That will sculpt your body, and it's all doable.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Very nice. That's great. Yeah, I love this. It's such a great conversation. And I will also say this, that I'm impressed with part of me was like, okay, how's Frank going to be optimistic in this time, in this day and age? And you did it. You know what I mean? It's like, I love that you said early on something about, well, there's no better time than to locate ourselves in our bodies. And with this, I'm butchering what you said, but I was like, yeah, this is a kind of opportunity. Like, okay, we're in this world that's asking us in some ways to do this, and it's like, okay, the antidote is all the things you're suggesting. Open up, have physical experiences, connect with other people, see other people, have these rich sensory, give yourself these rich sensory experiences that connect you to the ancestors, your friends, the earth, your community, your family.
Yeah, that word opportunity is pivotal now because a lot of our conventional pigeonholes and boundaries, these scope of practice ideas that we've had for a long time, all of those are going to break down like really soon because as conditions become more difficult and more challenging, we're going to have to play multiple roles. And if you're a trainer, you might have to function as an educator or a therapist.
Yeah.
If you're a teacher, you might have to function in some other capacity. So focusing on the human animal is actually a really good solution here because it gets us out of pigeonholes, and it also gets us out of this polarization that we're suffering from. It's like, no, we're all humans, and we all have the same basic challenge at this moment.
Yeah.
let's get over the polarization, start looking at the function of the human animal, and we can all do some good work there.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I've said it before. You got to run for office, man. We need you. Um, or at the very least, start a school, and failing that, just do more workshops. Are you doing many more workshops these days?
Not really. I got really hit by the pandemic, and
Yeah,
so it's in-person workshops are hard to set up, as you know, and it's a heavy lift to get everybody there, and the money, and the food, and the
sure.
lodging, and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, 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 yeah. This is the domain my wife lives in, and she, you know, she's actually, got a good following now. But even so, it's like you set up something like that, and it's like, even if it's well attended, you have to figure out your price point and all your costs and everything.
Oh,
Otherwise,
yeah.
you barely get enough to have a nice dinner at the end.
Right, right. Well, let me give a pitch also to the True Athlete Project. I don't
Nice.
yeah, it's called TAP, and they're out of Europe.